hệ thống
Cabinet members discuss socio-economic issues.
tốt.
Vietnamese wood manufacturing to follow trade commitments. Hello and welcome to another edition of BizLive brought to you by VTV International. I'm Hainam from Hanoi. And first, let's start with some highlights of the Vietnam's business scene over the past week. State President Trần Đại Quang on Wednesday met with 88 national brand-winning businesses. Speaking at the event, he asked the firms and the wider business community to continue promoting their role as the cutting edge in international economic integration and development. Also at the meeting, he listened to opinions and proposals of the business community on improving the business environment and brand building. In order to further joining the global supply chain, he called on firms to cooperate with each other and to build production chains. Among the 88 enterprises which received the Vietnam Value Awards this year, 78 enterprises hit profits of around $25 million and 26 enterprises achieved profits of over $200 million. Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc directed all ministries, sectors and localities to make concerted efforts to achieve socio-economic targets set by the National Assembly in 2016 during the November cabinet meeting. He said December is the peak time for disbursing basic construction capital, promoting sales of goods, ensuring traffic order and safety, and preventing fire and explosions. Prime Minister Phúc also instructed the Vietnam Asset Management Company to promote its role in handling bad debts, stressing that loss-making businesses must not be saved. He reiterated the resolve to cut public expenditure, asking localities to save 10% of their non-salary regular expenditure for salary-raising policy and other necessary tasks. He also ordered the early discussion of socio-economic development orientations for 2017 to avoid lax business and production at the beginning of the year. A ceremony to mark the 20th anniversary of the State Securities Commission was held on Monday in Hanoi. The first transaction on the Vietnamese Stock Exchange was carried out in 2000 after 4 years of preparations with only 2 listed companies. As of this November, the stock market has 1.6 million accounts, while its capitalization reached over $80 billion, or nearly 43% of gross domestic product. Overall, the securities market value accounted for 65% of GDP. The State Securities Commission used the occasion to launch a new brand identity. The logo represents a combination of the market's legal framework, its principles together with the liquidity and flexibility. These are expected to bring about new developments for the Commission and the Vietnamese Stock Exchange. The first batch of 5,000 tons of Polymer steel was recently exported to Canada. This was a big step forward for Vietnam's steel industry, especially when the global steel market is experiencing higher supply than demand. Apart from trade value, the biggest achievement for Vietnamese steel producers has been winning the confidence of a high-quality market, which has many strict regulations. The batch of steel was manufactured using modern technology, especially the use of recycled materials and waste processing that meet international green technology standards. The General Department of Taxation announced that the electronic value-added tax refunds will be implemented nationwide from 2017. The electronic VAT refund system has been piloted in 13 cities and provinces this year. 95% of online tax registration documents and 97% of online tax declaration and payments have seen positive results. In the coming time, the processing of tax refund procedures will be updated regularly and transparently on the General Department of Taxation website. 40 Vietnamese startups participated in the Slush Conference, an event to boost the worldwide startup movement held on Wednesday and Thursday in Finland. The number of Vietnamese entrepreneurs presenting at the Slush this year saw its largest number yet, compared with just 12 from last year's event. The participation of 1,700 startups and 800 investors from different countries around the world made this year's event reach a record high since its launch in 2008. One of the most noteworthy activities of this year is the promotion of global connectivity between startups, investors, and startup incubators. Additionally, Slush is seen as a competitive arena of hundreds of startup projects to receive a bonus worth up to 700,000 euros. It is a unique opportunity for Vietnamese startups to learn about startup strategies and gain experience from other startups firms in the world. We have just reviewed some of the economic highlights of the past week. Next, let's move on with a discussion on the oud manufacturing sector in Vietnam in our crosstalk. Oud manufacturing and exporting is one of Vietnam's billion-dollar industries. In 2015, Vietnamese export of oud and wooden products earned $6.9 billion, and the figure is estimated to reach 7.2 to 7.3 billion US dollars. Currently, Vietnam is the fourth largest exporters of wooden furniture and forest products. However, the commitments that Vietnam has made when joining the WTO and possibly the TPP and EVFTA in the coming time are set to have profound impacts on industrial production, including oud manufacturing. Because the space for support policies will be narrowed significantly. So how can the Vietnamese government and oud exporters deal with these challenges? To answer this question, our reporter Lina Pham sits down with Dr. To Xuân Phúc, program analyst from Forest Trends, Australia. But first, let's have an overview of the oud manufacturing sector in Vietnam in the following.
Wood manufacturing is one of Vietnam's billion US dollar exports, with export value reaching $6.9 billion US dollars in 2015 and estimated to rise to $7.3 billion US dollars this year. Export turnover of Vietnamese wood products is the highest in ASEAN, ranking second in Asia and sixth in the world. The sector creates about 300,000 jobs and encourages the development of SMEs and farmers' involvement in planting forests. Of more than 4,200 wood manufacturing businesses in Vietnam, about 1,000 have exported their products. Vietnamese wood products have reached over 100 countries and territories, including demanding markets such as the US and EU. According to the Vietnam Timber and Forest Product Association, wood manufacturers in Vietnam can be divided into 4 types based on their management capacity as well as their technology and production scale. FDI and big private enterprises for exporting, medium-scale manufacturers, wood manufacturers for domestic sales, handicraft businesses. Most of Vietnam's wood export go to international markets under foreign brand names, and there are not many Vietnamese enterprises with their own brand names. As Vietnam integrates into the global economy, the country's wood manufacturing sector will continue to strengthen its links in the global wood supply chain. This requires enterprises to observe stricter regulations in the international markets.
Dr. To Xuân Phúc, thank you very much for joining our BizLine program.
Thank you.
So can you please share some information about the wood trading between Vietnam and the US and EU and Australia, and what are the requirements of this market?
So Vietnam has been exporting wood products and furniture to more than 100 countries, with the US as the biggest country importing timber products from Vietnam. So every year, Vietnam wood processing industry derives about 2.6 billion US dollars from the US market. And this market has been expanding as well at the rate of about 12 to 15% every year as expanding wood product export to the US market. EU is less important, but then the value of wood products exported to the EU from Vietnam is very high, at about 700 to 800 million US dollars per year. Australia is less important in terms of export value, at about 170, 180 million US dollar per year. But what is common among these three largest export markets for furniture and wood products from Vietnam is that there is increasing market requirements on the timber products imported into these markets, including timber products from Vietnam. And one of the biggest requirements is the legality of the timber products exported into this market. So, for example, the US has a Lacey Act enacted in 2008, requiring all timber products sold on the US market had to meet the legality requirements from the government. The EU has a similar mechanism with, for example, EU timber regulation enacted in 2013. The Australia has a similar kind of mechanism with the Australian Illegal Timber Act implemented in 2012, requiring, again, all timber products traded on this market to meet the legality requirement, together with other requirements as well. For example, compliance to environmental pollution protection, or compliant to labor use or labor management.
With stricter regulations in major export markets, Vietnamese timber products are facing increasing risks, which can be divided into four groups, namely the legality of timber, effective control of supply chains, labor use, and knowledge of regulations in export markets. Among them, the legality of timber and effective control of supply chains have major impacts, because Vietnam still has to import a large amount of timber in addition to wood from artificial forests. Meanwhile, major markets including the US and the EU are tightening regulations on the legality of timber in wood imports.
Cái bên này là phải nói là một hiệp định rất lớn, trong đó quy định rất rõ về cái nguồn nguyên liệu. Chúng tôi cái xuất xứ của nguyên liệu là cực kỳ quan trọng hiệp định này. Bởi vì trước đây thì chúng ta mua gỗ là mua rất tự do. Chúng tôi nói thẳng là từ năm 15-16 năm trở về trước ấy, chúng ta mua gỗ của 70 quốc gia trên thế giới để làm xuất khẩu và cũng như tiêu thụ trong nước. Nhưng theo TPP thì chúng ta chỉ được phép mua trong 12 quốc gia của TPP này thôi.
What are the risks related to legality of timber input?
One of the requirements from the biggest markets like the US, the EU, and Australia is a legality of timber products traded on the market in this country. Now, Vietnam is exporting a lot of products into this market, particularly the US, but it doesn't mean that all companies, all Vietnamese wood processing companies are now playing on this market can meet that requirement. We just did a survey with the 153 different wood processing industry here. It's about 40% of the companies on the US market do not understand this requirement. Clearly, this is a very high risk for this company because you are selling the products on this market and you don't understand about legal requirements on the products. Yeah. In addition to risks associated with the legality, there are many different kinds of risks. For example, requirement or compliance to labor use, compliance to environmental protection, pollution protection, or something like that.
What are the environmental commitments in the TPP and EVFTA, and what are their future impacts?
Yep, both TPP and EVFTA do not have a specific clause or articles related to environment. What is required in the TPP and EVFTA is quite zero. So basically it requires that, for example, Vietnam is a country entering into this agreement have to have a very clear legal framework related to environmental protection. So as long as Vietnam have that kind of clear legal framework, Vietnam will not have a problem with requirement from TPP. Similar to EVFTA, it requires Vietnam to comply the company, Vietnamese company, to comply with the existing legal framework in Vietnam. The Vietnamese government has a quite clear, transparent legal framework on environment. The problem now is with the enforcement level. So at first level, not all companies know clearly about Vietnamese legal framework related to environmental protection. Second, the enforcement, because of local authorities in many places that are not aware of that kind of legal framework. So enforcing that kind of requirement is very loose, producing kind of breach for our challenge for companies.
On November the 18th, Vietnam and the EU agreed in principle on a forest law enforcement, governance and trade voluntary partnership agreement, or pledged VPA, after nearly 6 years of negotiation. The agreement aims at reducing illegal logging and promoting trade in legally produced timber between the EU and Vietnam through an ambitious licensing system for Vietnamese timber and timber products. This will ensure that Vietnam's exports of timber and timber products to the EU come from legal sources. To implement the VPA, Vietnam will develop a timber legality assurance system, or VNTLAS, and other reforms outlined in the agreement, including issuing specific legislation to ensure the legality of the timber it imports for further processing.
Chúng tôi kỳ vọng là cái thị phần, cái kim ngạch xuất khẩu vào EU nó sẽ tăng lên. Đến giờ phút này thì đến hết năm nay, kể cả năm 16 này, thì cái gọi là cái thị phần cũng như là cái kim ngạch xuất khẩu EU nó chỉ chiếm trên 10% so với tổng số thôi. Đấy khoảng 600-700 triệu một năm thôi, nó chưa nhiều. Bởi vì sao? Bởi vì là hiện nay là gọi là EU thực chất là chỉ vào 5 quốc gia chính, tức là Pháp, Đức, Ý, Tây Ban Nha và Anh. Thế nếu mà hiệp định được ký, chúng ta sẽ triển khai rộng ở 27 quốc gia. Trước đây 28, bây giờ 27 quốc gia EU. Như vậy kim ngạch sẽ tăng lên cả tỷ đô la.
However, it may take some time for Vietnam to establish an effective legal framework on timber legality, which can support domestic manufacturers and meet EU's requirements at the same time.
With the VPA FLEGT, wood export to EU are set to increase 2 to 3 times. So what's your opinion about this?
This is difficult to comment. From my personal point of view, I don't think that Vietnam wood industry will be benefiting from this in the short term. Because first, it will take Vietnam at least another 10 years in order to set up a mechanism, for example, Flexi VPA. So Flexi VPA is a mechanism to be set up by the Vietnamese government to make sure that all timber products produced in Vietnam sold in the European market is legal. And right now, we don't have a system in place yet. Discussion has been that it may take Vietnam at least about 5 years in order to set up that mechanism, so that timber products produced in Vietnam could be Flexi licensed products, so that they can enter into the European market without having to do a lot with the, for example, due diligence. So basically, the products meet the legal requirement in the EU market. Within 5-year period, I don't think that Vietnam wood products will expand about 2 or 3 times, basically because the system is not in place yet. Now, when the system is in place, with the Flexi licensing timber system is ready, it's very difficult to estimate how many time the timber processing industry will be expanded. Basically, because Flexi VPA is about requirement for the forest or for the timber products or for the wood products and furniture to be met with the market requirement. Now, Vietnam could benefiting from Flexi VPA in the sense that it raised the reputation of the wood processing industry in a way that, yes, now I can meet the EU requirements on the timber products and all products to be exported to EU or any other market, or any products or even products on domestic markets is illegal. So in that way, Vietnam may benefit from raising the reputation so that the export market could be expanded. but there's no guarantee yet because it's more speculation.
Vietnam has to import a lot of timber input. So how do you think Vietnam can comply to the rule of origin when exporting wood products to EU and other markets?
Vietnam has to do a lot in order to meet this kind of requirement. Let me give you some figures that you can imagine the complexity of this. Every year, Vietnam imports about 4.5 million cubic meter of timber and about 160 to 170 timber species. So basically, controlling the legality of timber import into Vietnam is very challenging. I can divide timber import into Vietnam into two different sorts. One is from the very safe or environmentally legal source, like Vietnam import a lot of timber from the US as well. Vietnam also import a lot of timber as raw material from Europe. So the companies import timber from this source here, they process and export it back to the US and Europe. And this kind of product is considered as clean. But Vietnam also import a lot of timber from what is commonly say as a high-risk source. For example, the volume of timber import from Africa is increasing. And by now, we don't have much information from Africa about the legality of timber exported to Vietnam from that country. So there's no guarantee that timber imported from the Mekong countries or from Africa is legal. So setting up a mechanism for controlling the legality of timber import is very challenging. But because Vietnam is committed to flexible VPA, it has to set up that kind of mechanism. And the government has been working hard on this by, for example, getting more information about the countries, a legal framework in the countries that export timber to Vietnam. But again, it's very difficult soon in the future for Vietnam to have that kind of effective mechanism for controlling the legality of timber import.
Woodland Joint Stock Company mostly produces wood exports to the EU. Each year, the company needs up to 200,000 cubic meters of timber. Because most timber is harvested from artificial forests planted by farmers, it is quite difficult to ensure a stable supply of timber while also ensuring quality and legality. Anticipating the FLEGT VPA and other regulations on timber origin, the company has made preparation during the last few years.
Những cái đối tác mà đã khẳng định rằng chúng tôi sẽ cùng với nhau đi những chặng đường dài ấy, thì chúng tôi có những cái hợp đồng, có những cái thỏa thuận để cùng phát triển cái vùng nguyên liệu phù hợp với cả cái tiêu chuẩn của những cái tiêu chuẩn quốc tế như là FSC, như là hay là phù hợp với cả những cái quy định ở trong cái hiệp định mà chúng ta vừa mới ký kết với Liên minh châu Âu là Securities. Thì để làm được cái điều đó thì người ta phải đầu tư rất nhiều vào cái chuyện là phải tư vấn để xây dựng những cái bộ tiêu chuẩn và việc thực hiện những cái tiêu chuẩn mà châu Âu người ta chấp nhận, thì công ty Woodland tham gia và tài trợ cho những cái hoạt động đó.
As one of the major wood manufacturers in Vietnam, Saigon Trade and Production Development Corporation considers the US its main market. To meet the requirements set by the Lacey Act, this company has built standard production processes. Recently, as the TPP agreement's future remains unclear, the company is still focusing on expanding its business in the US.
Cái sản phẩm đồ gỗ đối với lại thị trường nước ngoài như là Mỹ, như châu Âu hoặc một số nước khác luôn luôn là những sản phẩm mà được khách hàng ưa chuộng. Vì vậy nên chúng tôi nghĩ rằng là thí dụ chúng ta cái hiệp định TPP có ký kết hay không ký kết thì về phía đồ gỗ vẫn phải sản xuất, vẫn phải cung cấp ra cái thị trường mục tiêu, vẫn phải đáp ứng đầy đủ cái nhu cầu ngày càng cao.
In the coming time, Vietnam will not be able to apply any protectionist policies through taxes or subsidies following its trade commitments. However, helping businesses enhance their capacities is still allowed. This is also what wood manufacturers expect.
Hiện nay có quá ít cái cơ sở đào tạo cái người lao động cho cái ngành chế biến gỗ này. Những cái trường trung cấp ngày xưa thì còn có một vài trường, bây giờ những cái trường ấy gần như cũng giải thể. Thì tôi nghĩ rằng là cần phải đầu tư nhiều hơn cho cái giáo dục đào tạo, cái nguồn nhân lực.
Hiện nay tôi nói thì các hiệp định về EV, FTA Việt Nam EU hoặc là hiệp định TPP sắp tới hay là cộng đồng kinh tế ASEAN. Hiện nay là doanh nghiệp Việt Nam hiểu chưa đầy đủ, mà làm sao phải có những biên soạn rất cụ thể, rất chi tiết để giúp cho người ta hiểu được cái nội dung này, để người ta xây dựng cái chiến lược của người ta, giúp cho doanh nghiệp Việt Nam nắm bắt được cái quy trình. Đấy, tôi cho cái quy trình quan trọng, quy trình thu mua nguyên liệu thế nào là gọi là pháp, quy trình sản xuất sản phẩm gỗ thế nào là pháp, quy trình xuất khẩu thế nào là pháp.
I want to ask you a question about the role of the state in supporting, Vietnam to meet all of the commitments. What do you think?
Not only about the role of the state, but also the role of timber association, the role of all actors in the society, basically. But with the role of the state, I think the state can do a lot of things. First is to uplift the company to the level that can meet the requirement, not only at the country level, but also at the international market level. And one way to do that, again, is to provide more market information to the industry in a way that industry can access to that kind of information. Again, it's not like the state provide information to industry, but it have to find way to translate it into practical terms or conditions so that industry can pick it up and apply it at the production level. So for example, setting up the information center or setting up the, capacity building center. One of the problems with timber industry now is low productivity. If you compare the productivity level of the wood processing sector in Vietnam with neighboring countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, or China. So there has been some discussion among the state here about how to lift up the level of productivity within the wood sector. There are many ways for the state to do that, and one of that is to provide support for training through university or through vocational training centers or through timber association also, to provide practical training skills for workers who will be or who have been working with the timber industry so that they can increase the level of productivity. The second is about technology. Most of Vietnamese wood processing company are using kind of low-level technology, basically from China. Basically because of the import the cost for importing technology from, for example, Europe or US is very high, so many companies could not afford it. Now, one way for the company to access to that kind of technology is to access to favorable loans from the state for importing that kind of technology. The state do not have to provide all loans for the companies, but provide kind of certain amounts of loans that allows the company to beef up to the EU technology or US technology, so that company can access more to this kind of modern technology that can save the energy, that can save the material like wood input.
So in your opinion, what support measures should be prioritized, should be implemented first?
I think it should be divided into short-term, medium-term, and long-term. For example, long-term, investment in education for workers or training for workers is most important. Also, the investment in technology improvement should be considered as a medium-term or a long-term priority. But in the short term, I think because 95% of timber industry in Vietnam, companies in Vietnam are small in scale. So accessing to loan is so important. I think in short term, the state can provide that kind of favorable loans for the company to access to that so that they can improve their management, production, or something like that.
Thank you very much, Dr. To Xuân Phúc, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Many support policies for the wood manufacturing sector will soon be inapplicable following the WTO commitments and the upcoming free trade agreements. However, that doesn't mean that the government will not be able to support the wood manufacturing sector. Using non-tariff barriers as well as helping businesses enhance capacity and competitiveness are highly recommended by experts. And that brings us to the end of this edition of BizLine. Remember that you can always rewatch our program at vtv4.vn and youtube.com/vtv4go. From our team here in Hanoi, and until next time.